Well, the first time I came to Boston,
I had mixed feelings. I was partly excited.
But I was also feeling a little bit frightened and anxious.
And I was scared.
I was scared.
kind of isolated, but I wasn't scared.
It was kind of exciting, of course. Exciting feeling of just entering something totally new.
I felt very much at home in Boston.
I felt as if I could just blend in.
I felt a little bit lonely though.
But otherwise, my feelings were just happiness. A lot of feeling also of expectation.
I was somehow lost.
I was lost with the language, yeah.
When I came in the beginning, I was like very apprehensive of what kind of friends I'd make, or whether I would have a lot of friends or things like that.
I felt that I wasn't going to meet anybody. I felt that I wasn't going to have many friends.
I was isolated. I felt like crying, believe it or not.
I felt like nobody understood me, nobody was there.
Because I didn't know anybody in Boston. I had nobody there who could support me.
And I really did long to go home.
I used to live with my family all the time. So for me it felt like jumping to the cold water.
My first week was like a dream, really. New school, new people, new language, new continent, everything.
The first week, I would say I didn't feel lonely at all and I didn't feel homesick because everything was so new to me. Everything was kind of exciting.
At first I came, I was very, very confident. Probably too confident.
Yeah, I was just observing people, you know, how they behave, like in the sense. I knew that it's going to be very different.
I was coped with many kind of difficulties with doing papers, getting my money which was supposed to be wired from France and it was delayed, etc. I had a lot of practical details that had to be solved when I came here, and that was not easy.
I was lost. I was lost. You know, the system here is so different from the system at home.
Confused. There's no way you can avoid being confused.
Yeah, the abbreviations drove me crazy. Go to 881, then go to GSU, then to COM, then stop. It was what is what.
I remember I felt myself like a stone, just I couldn't understand and I didn't say anything and I didn't have friends, and I was so stiff, nervous all day, and terrible. Finally, when I got the apartment and I moved in the apartment, I felt very lonely because the phone never rang and I didn't have friends. I met some people I went out with, but of course, I mean, I couldn't call them friends right after the first date.
So I guess I was very lonely that very first week. You know, plus I was busy doing all the paperwork, getting registered, selecting courses, buying my books. So half of my time was also dedicated into getting all those things done. But at the same time, when I went back to my room at night in the dorm, I was like, you know, who's here with me? I didn't have anybody to call.
I guess it is a common feeling. I've talked to a lot of people, and the first semester is sometimes something you don't want to think back. You're just very glad that it's over.
Stand up. Anybody from Israel, stand up. Anybody else in that row? China? Who's from China? Oh, there's a few folks from China. Pakistan. Pakistan, anybody else? Okay. Bangladesh. Anybody else from Bangladesh? 3.
Anybody who goes to a new place experiences a loss of what is familiar. And no matter how much you know about another culture, it's not one thing to, it's one thing to watch an American movie and another thing is to be living everyday life here. So even if you know a lot about another culture, to lose what is comfortable for you and everyday kinds of behavior of people, and try to adjust to something that it's completely different and completely new, or even a little different, creates a sense of disorientation.
I think one expects when you go to a new country that there will be differences, but generally I think you expect these differences will be in the area of customs, of doing things differently. And it comes as something of a shock to you to find out that the differences that make the biggest, have the biggest effect are differences not of customs, but differences that bring into question your own personal values. You see, the problem is that every country teaches its values as if they were the only set of values that is worth learning, and every other set of values would be inferior. And every culture has to do this, or else they're not going to impart their values. But it comes as a shock to you, and that's why we call it culture shock, when you realize in living in this new culture that your own values are being brought into question, and that sort of pulls the rug out from under you and leaves you for a moment without values, and you get rather frightened as if you're about to drown or something like that.
Because we say culture shock, we think, oh my God, I'm going to be so shocked that everything is going to be... And it's not like that. It's something that it's very subtle. I mean, it may be shock for some people. If you have never seen a tall building and you come into Boston, that might be a shock. But I say that is less complicated than the other.
It's difficult to describe because all of this happens over an accumulated period of time, and you can't blame it on any one thing. You can't trace and point to, this is what it is that's bothering me. But what it is basically is that your own values that you feel very strongly about because they have been put into you in such a way that you take them very seriously, as you should. And then suddenly you find that here is another set of people living by values that are very often quite in contrast with my own, and they're getting along okay. And if I'm going to operate in this culture, I'm going to have to operate from that set of values rather than my own, even though I need to retain those values in order to be myself. And so it's a conflict situation that is not easily resolved, and it's difficult even to find anyone to talk to while all of this is going on in your head.
People say that there are 3 stages to culture shock, and that the first part is finding that everything is fine and you don't have any problem and it's beautiful and I love this place and it's like a honeymoon stage. Everything is perfect, or nothing is as bad as you had anticipated. And then little by little you start getting irritated. And what happens then is that nothing is good. You don't like Americans, this food is terrible, the weather is horrible. You start finding that everything is bad and you don't like anything. And you don't think, I am experiencing culture shock. What you think is, I don't like this place. It's unpleasant to be here. And then after some time of that, the 2 things start sort of getting together, and there are things you like and, adjust to, and there are things that you will never like and will never adjust to and will never feel comfortable with.
The first months I was happy to be there, and this second month I had this big, I think, culture shock. I don't know how to explain it otherwise. I was depressed, I felt lonely, I was asking me lots of questions.
Of course, there is this feeling of frustration because you just cannot say the things you would like really to say. And sometimes you have very subtle feelings and you want to share it with somebody and you just cannot.
What I'm doing here, why did I leave? Why am I doing this program?
What is not to be expected is that something that you liked so much to do, to come to study and etc., starts becoming, I don't like this place, I don't like this career, who said I wanted to study this, who said I wanted to be here. That a disgust with something or a dislike of something that you had worked so hard to get.
Everybody was saying, what's going on with you? And I just said, forget it. And I had these friends from the International Student Office who took me to parties and trying to feel me let me feel better and so on. And I just couldn't. And I couldn't help it out. And I'm not the person being very depressive normally. And I couldn't understand myself. It was horrible.
And at the beginning, I was kind of getting in panic very easily if there was a problem coming up.
When you're disoriented, the same kind of thing that you could absorb easily at home is you overreact to. And I think that's part of a culture shock reaction. You become so disoriented that something that you could absorb becomes magnified, and it's not absorbable anymore.
So if you don't feel good, you just say, okay, it must be America. So you have this topic and you say, okay, these are the bad people and I am all right. And you just criticize everything. And I think also other people had the same feeling. So we got together and had this big discussion about how can they be like this?
Belittling and saying bad things about the new culture is a part of almost everyone's culture shock, because they are so frustrated and they are suffering and they can't quite pin it on anything. They can't quite know what it's coming from, and yet they know they're very unhappy. And they know that things are being done quite opposite to what is appropriate in their own country. And they're being very critical of these because these are not fitting their own values of their own country.
I felt as if I can handle every situation, like how to live, how to survive, and all that stuff. But when after 2 years, it was after 2 years that I realized that I was doing a lot of things wrong. Not that it was really wrong. In England, it would be right.
It was more of a shock in relationships with people and the way you behave, or you're not supposed to behave sometimes.
I was like sort of slowly falling apart.
Yes, culture shock does vary, although the more we find out about it, we find there is a pattern to it. And generally there is what we call a double dip, that you experience a smaller dose of it at first, and then later on the real deep dip hits most people.
The most common predictor of someone who will have trouble is the person who denies that there is cultural adjustment, that there is cultural shock, or that there's any need to even be aware of going through this process of change. Those people who deny it are the ones who have the toughest time.
I really knew I was in America when I was nearly run down. 3 times in the first week I was here. As we drive on the other side of the road, we expect the cars to come from the right-hand side. So I would look to the right-hand side, nothing was coming, so out I'd, oh dear, there's a car coming from my left.
Americans can be so critical. They're very blunt. They'll just say whatever's on their mind.
To me, in certain moments, they're rude, comparing to our standards back home.
What is considered to be a good value in one culture is absolutely a bad value in another culture. And if you are from a culture, say, for example, an East Asian culture, where the human dignity of yourself and most importantly of the other person is always preserved, then you will not value openness and directness and honesty that will embarrass someone. It's much more honest and honorable to be dishonest in such a case to preserve the other person's human dignity. And Americans are not very aware of that. Americans think that they have an obligation to teach the truth even if it embarrasses somebody. And the plain fact is that Americans would not be embarrassed in the same way that an Asian would. So Americans are not even aware that they're doing this terrible thing by being open and direct and honest to an Asian. But we're dealing here with values that are 180 degrees apart, and as far apart as you can get. And I think that probably if you lived in the United States for all of your life, you would never get to the point where you would insult someone publicly just to be honest and open.
I grew up knowing that saying no to somebody was rude. It was very impolite to say no. It's not so with Americans. An American, when he doesn't like something, he goes straight and tells you, no, man, I don't like it, or I don't want to do that. But home, you know, you don't say no, it's rude. There is a way to say no, indirectly, you know. For instance, if you invite me, I will not say, no, Noriko, I'm not coming to your place. But I will answer by not showing up, you see?
Americans view indirectness either because a person is hinting or suggesting rather than saying it outright, or by having an intermediary carry a message as the person is somewhat less than trustworthy. That's how it's generally interpreted. I think the reason for that is that there's a feeling that if you have nothing to hide, then you'll be totally open. If you have nothing that you are ashamed of, then you will be a natural and open person in your dealings.
Privacy to the American can be so important.
Yeah, I find, like, you know, it's very funny is like most Americans are very private, which is true in most Western countries. People are very private, you know.
They believe they have a right to their privacy. It's a theory of entitlement. They have a right to it. It isn't a privilege, it isn't extra. It's something very natural to them.
Americans get increasingly more and more protective of themselves and of other people invading their privacy or their time or their space, and will do everything to protect it.
Whereas in India, you don't have a very private life as such. It's always family first, you know, a lot of friends. You know, a friend could drop in the midnight and say, hey, let's go for a drink, and you'd go with him, you know. Whereas here, you wouldn't do it. I mean, people just like the private life. Once they're in their apartment, they want to just, you know, watch TV and not worry about, you know, everything else.
Privacy is an interesting thing because in most languages, most non-European languages, the word that is translated for privacy is a very negative kind of thing. It means to be expelled from the group, to be cast out, to be lonely. It doesn't mean any of those things to Americans. It means only positive and good things, that you are, it's almost like a religious feeling, the way Americans feel about privacy. And so it's difficult to penetrate an American. It's not difficult to have a shallow, friendly relationship with someone you don't even know. Americans are very willing to spend time to tell you personal things that you would think in your own country should not be told except to your very best friend.
Like, why is this person telling me that he has a kid, that he has been divorced twice, and we just met? I mean, it's like something that you would never share so quickly back home.
And Americans will tell it to people they're riding on the bus with they've never seen before and will never see again.
On the other hand, when it comes like to offering real friendship, like offering support, people are more individualistic here.
And that makes it's very hard to understand how are these people so open, and yet when you try to penetrate and to make friends with them, then they close off. And the reason for that is that they are fearful of anything that will take away or dig into their privacy.
Time management is another big, term in this country.
I had an appointment with my advisor at 4:30. When I went, he's on the 6th floor of the building, but I was late. I was a few seconds late. Why? Because the elevator was broken. When I started walking up the stairs, I got at his office, and there were many people waiting for him, but he was looking for me there. Among the people, he didn't see me. So he started making arrangements to see somebody else. But at that time I arrived, he said, no, you are late.
Manage your time wisely so you can be efficient and get the most out of it. And that's going to be something, probably the hardest thing that you learn coming to this university if you're not used to that pace.
And he told me, I'm not meeting you. I was shocked and devastated. At first I thought he didn't like me, but I realized that it was my fault. You have to be there on time.
Keeping in mind all of the time that the most precious thing that an American has is time. And it's always very limited, particularly in a busy city. Life is very complex and very busy, and most Americans who who want to have some time by themselves have a hard time finding enough time to do that already without too many more obligations.
There was one guy I remember who asked me, Munich, because I come from Munich, is it in South America, is it in Europe? And I was kind of very speechless.
And I try to prepare the foreign students who come through here to be prepared for the dumb questions that they'll ask. I tell a couple of stories that illustrate that, of things that really happened and that I'm aware of. One young lady from Indonesia was being shown around the city by an American host who lived in that city, and he had been very kind. He had taken his whole day off from work, and he was giving it to her to show her around. And near the end of the day, he asked to take her photograph and standing in front of a monument, and as he was taking the picture, he said, "Do you have cameras in Indonesia?" Well, she was very offended by that. Obviously, they have cameras in Indonesia. Another young man from Costa Rica was eating dinner in an American home, and the hostess said, "Do you have tomatoes in Costa Rica?" You know, Americans are just plain ignorant.
And there was a very good friend of mine recently asking me, "Tina, are you from West or from East Germany?" And I was shocked, because I told her then very calmly, if I would be from East Germany, I wouldn't be here, because these people are not allowed to travel to Western countries.
And these are educated people. So that kind of ignorance bothered me a lot. I mean, where is Zaire? I said, what do you mean, where is Zaire? There is a big country in Africa. So, well, I thought Africa was a country. So many people have asked me, who's the president of Africa? You know?
Yes, Americans are very ignorant of the rest of the world, and that's a very embarrassing thing. And I think it may help if the international visitor realizes that even among college graduates here, the last time they've had a course in geography was probably in the 6th grade in elementary school. Now that, of course, says a lot. It says that Americans don't value a knowledge of the world. Americans think that everything important is going on here, or with our involvement. So, you know, that's a very ignorant attitude, and a very narrow-minded attitude.
Americans are very, very impatient. I remember this story that happened to me in Burger King. You know, it's very difficult to order food when you don't know what to say. But fortunately enough, in Burger King, the menu is behind you. So I was reading there, and I knew what a cheeseburger was. And I said, okay, can I have a cheeseburger and a Coke? And, you know, punching the machine and so on. And then when I finished ordering, she asked me, for here to go? I said, for here to go. I didn't get it at first, because she said it very quickly. And I said, pardon me? She said, for here to go. I said, well, seemed not to understand. When she saw that I was in trouble understanding what she was saying, she said it slowly. She said, for here or to go, which I understood, but I didn't get the meaning. I said, for here or to go, what does she mean? And you know, I was lost. I really looked lost, because I didn't know what she was saying. And then, you know, she became very impatient and annoyed that I didn't understand what she was saying. She said, who's next? And then, fortunately enough, there was a gentleman behind me, and he was the next person. And instead of talking to the lady ordering his food, explained to me. He said, do you want your food here, or you want to take it home? And I said, oh, now I understand what she means. I said, no, I want to eat here. And then she took a tray and served me.
My experience was at the real estate agency, and I went there, and I wanted to rent the apartment because I really liked it. This was the first apartment. And this guy at the real estate office looked at me and he said, you know, I'm not very fond of renting apartments to foreign students because they're so dirty. And I looked at him and I thought, Jesus, why do you think that? And the apartments I've seen all over Austin, Brighton, they were really dirty, and there were American students living there. I don't want to say that American students are more dirty than foreign students, but I'm sure it's not the other way around. It's just a very stupid point. And I feel I should have said something, but I was just speechless, and I felt very bad. This was I think, a very good case of discrimination. I think I could use this term in this case. And this was no profound or fundamental opinion. I mean, he couldn't really prove it.
We're dealing with people who are very ethnocentric and very egocentric, and who we simply have to realize that's the situation that often is caused by having a big country with many resources and being so self-sufficient.
This is the superpower, this is the country, the leading nation of the world, they think. And they don't realize that there are other countries with even richer histories, richer traditions, richer cultures, and instead of looking at things as, you know, equal and things to be studied, they look down upon them. And that isn't true of everyone, but many, many people are just not aware.
I had these problems at the beginning where the people were saying, "Hi, how are you?" And I said, I felt good, I felt bad, I felt whatever. And the people just didn't listen to me. Who cares? And I was afraid, first of all, because I felt very scary. I didn't have these bases and so on. So I thought the people have something against me. And what did I do wrong and so on?
Hi, how are you? And the second person passes and says, hi, how are you? It's like, why are you responding to my question with the same question? And they don't even wait for a response. Hi, how are you? And that's it. I mean, something like that said to me, this isn't very, friendships seem too systematic rather than real. That was one thing that struck me, and that was very disillusioning for me.
We don't say, I'm fine, generally. We just pass it off like that. And most people find that very superficial, find it very difficult to live with.
Like, you know, you walk down the streets, you see someone, "Hi, George, how are you? Have a good weekend. I'll see you later. I'll call you." You say, "I'll call you," and you never call.
I was insulted at first. Imagine so-and-so said they call me and nothing. What's with me? What's with them? You know, I really felt bad at first. But after a while, I heard it so much that I realized that this was the way the people were.
There is this myth, let's call it myth, existing that Americans are superficial. I heard this before a lot of time, and now I could, you know, comment myself because I know it in reality. And there is, unfortunately, something true about this myth that Americans are superficial.
The kind of life we have here is a kind of superficial life. I find that it is not very deep.
I found that American friendships seemed a lot more superficial and a lot shallower than the friendships I had been accustomed to. People seemed to want to make friends, and yet their friendship was just a surface type of friendship. It wasn't a very deep relationship.
Particularly this country, where there's a lot of geographical mobility, that people live here sometime and here another time and here another time. People need to learn to make friends fast, and at the same time there is not the same level of friendship that if you have known a person all your life and played with them when you were children and gone to school and grown up together, and there cannot be the same level of friendship that way. And that deep sense of friendship happens in more traditional societies because people are born and live and grow and die in the same place. So there's a chance for establishing those more permanent contacts. While in this society, it is a survival skill that people have to learn to make connections, friendships, quickly and without having the time to develop very deep friendships, because then they will be moving on to another place later. So that might be, I think, part of the sense of superficial.
I never had to worry about friends, right? They were just there and they called me. I mean, I called them too, but it was kind of give and take all the time. And this time I knew I wanted to make friends, and I had to face that I have to take the initiative and call people. And for me, it was very hard because I felt very hesitant to be pushy, and I thought this is something pushy if you call people and you say, why don't we go out? Then you meet them in class and say the same thing again, and you kind of give them your phone number. And I got some response. They were not really rude or unpolite or something, but I really didn't know whether they liked me or whether there was something different. So one night I found out that a lot of people of my class went out and they didn't call me, although a lot of people had my phone number. And there was one girl I was a little bit closer to, and the next time I saw her, I said, I thought I better open up, and I said, I'm very disappointed that you didn't call me. Is there something you don't like with me, or why didn't you call me? And she was kind of shocked and said, oh, Tina, I'm sorry, we just didn't think about it. And I think this explains a lot for me with Americans, that they don't think about foreigners, wherever they come from, that they have problems getting to know people, that they need friends. And so I just thought, now I know why they don't do it. They don't do it because they just don't think about it. So I felt better being pushy.
But Americans, yes, are very insensitive to the needs of foreign students who are really sometimes crying for help, for contact, for personal relationships. Because one of the things you will notice if you come from a culture, and most cultures are like this, that are more personally oriented, where human interaction is more important than it is in the United States.
My first month, I started meeting people, but maybe I thought they were my real friends, and they had another impression of our relationship. And I got very frustrated because people that I thought were my real trustful and real strong friends, like my Hispanic culture dictates, to that American person was like, well, I know her, she's nice, she's in my class, and we study together and whatever, but hey, you're going too fast, don't ask me so many questions, don't get so much information from me.
I think you have to realize, first of all, that the way you are defining friend is very different from the way the American defines friend.
To me, a friend is a friend. You care for a friend. A friend is like a brother or a sister. That you're not connected by blood. That's all.
A friend is a real friend. It's somebody that you can count on, and it's somebody that it's always there with you. You can call at any time, and you give a lot of personal information to that friend.
Americans start seeing friendship as something, well, a good friend to me is someone that I call once a week to see how they're doing.
Americans are satisfied with that kind of shallow interaction with large numbers of people. And I think you have to understand that difference.
I have American friends that I know would do anything for me, and I'd do anything for them. So you can't say Americans are going to be that way.
But we're talking about a deep and lasting friendship that you're talking about, that most Americans don't experience and never will. We live in a very individualistic, very selfish world, because Americans think that the individual is the focus of all attention.
If you look at them as a group, that's the way it will seem, that they are superficial. But I think that if you get to know somebody pretty well, all superficial barriers and stuff are broken down. So if you get to know people well, and it takes time, and it takes a lot of talking.
But it isn't much very different, I haven't found, in most countries, the countries that I've been. To really make friends, you can't do it very easily. Because everyone already has a set of friends and a set of obligations, and they can't really take on too much more.
American people are very competition-oriented. I have to do this, and I have to do this fast. You might be my friend, but I have to do this. I'm competing with you. We're in the same class. We're competing.
In my culture, as we're very used to share things, that typical image of the Hispanic students all sitting together and working together with an assignment. Okay, well, if we're doing a worksheet for math or something, well, okay, problem 1, I know problem 2, so let's exchange. I'll give you a problem. You know, we exchange the answers, and not only the answers, but we explain to each other how to solve the problems. With American students, it's a bit hard to do that.
It isn't easy for most people to share everything in this country, just because there isn't a mentality towards that, because of the self-reliance value that we have and the independence.
The behavior which struck me most was that which took place in the classroom.
When you are against the opinion of the professor, you just express it. And I was surprised seeing people raising their hands while somebody else was talking. I thought it's quite rude.
You can ask, you can interrupt. When the professor is saying something right in the middle of a sentence, you can interrupt the professor and say, wait a minute, but that's supposed to be 2, you know, like when he's calculating or something, or, you know, ask a question that's totally not in the, you know, not in the context of, you know, the professor might be saying something quite important, and it's exactly time to leave, and the students don't care, they don't listen, and they just walk out. I think that's very strange.
At first, I found them really, really very indisciplined, rude, with their feet up on the desk, things like that, you know. It was like they had absolutely no respect whatsoever for the professor.
Most foreign students pay much more respect to the professor and won't question anything he says.
Back home, everything is very formal. Your professor is like the god, you know. He knows everything and you know nothing.
I remember an Iranian student who was describing the experience he had when he first came to the United States in the classroom, and he said the first time that his American professor said, I don't know the answer to that, I'll have to look it up, he said he was just shocked. He said, why am I here trying to learn from this man? He said, in my country, a professor would give a wrong answer rather than admit he didn't know.
Well, the relationship with authority is very different. Here, the idea is not that you respect authority, it's that you question authority, and you challenge, and you want to know why things are done. I mean, and it's done with the president, and it's done with professors, and it's done with parents, and it's done with everyone. So for other places where young people are trained to respect and be polite and, you know, and do not challenge authority, and it seems horrible. Not only that, but sometimes the professors seem horrible because they don't behave professorially. They're friendly and they, you know, drink Coke in class or smoke or sit on top of the desk, or, you know, professors do things that don't seem to be appropriate.
A professor who doesn't have any questions, who doesn't have anyone challenge his points, thinks that his classroom is dead. You know, the professor expects to stimulate thought in you, to provoke criticism, to have some kind of critical thinking, so that it isn't that you're being disrespectful when you say to a professor, well, I don't believe that that evidence that you just presented to us is valid because it isn't representative. I did that in one class the other day, and he said afterwards, you have a very good point. And I was criticizing what he had just said to us, and that wasn't because I don't respect him.
The teacher enjoys that kind of confrontation if it's done in the right kind of way. Now, if it's done in a very insulting way, then the professor would not like that. But you'll notice that it's done in a challenging way, we say, which is not done with anger in general, but is done in a kind of good-hearted argument.
Most commonly, professors want students that are awake, that are paying attention and have something to respond to. Most students should not feel like interrupting is rude, because it's important to, if something isn't clear, the professor wants to be understood. So it's fine to say, well, is this what you're trying to say, or could it be taken this way? And that's fine, it isn't being rude. It means that you respect him, you're listening to him.
I had a night class. I had 2 classes, Mondays and Wednesdays, from 5:30 to 7:30, and then one from 7:30 to 9:30. So the 7:30 class was in the School of Nursing, which is like right next door to Burger King. And I had these couple of students, American guys, who would be in the same class in the 5:30 class, and then they would be in my same 7:30 class. And like in the first week, I was so surprised. One guy gets a salad, the other guy gets like this Whopper, and he gets into class with his ham, and starts eating. And I said, "Oh my God, isn't the professor going to say anything?" And the professor's like, "It's normal behavior." So of course he doesn't even look at them, I said, "Oh wow, this is something." I was amazed. Yeah. I was so amazed.
Sometimes it can be bothersome to me because some students, it's very common to bring a cup of coffee into the class or a can of soda into the class. That's no big problem, but there are people that eat potato chips in class. That is rude. I mean, that you don't have to be from any other country. It's rude to be making noise when someone else is talking, like munching, that isn't right. And most professors don't say anything. Sometimes they will. There shouldn't be that kind of disruptive activity going on.
Coming into a new school, a big school, a foreign country, a new way of life, I think it's perfectly normal that you don't feel quite at home the minute you step off the plane. But I advise everyone to take their time and let it work with it, look at the people, see what they do, so that you won't be a total outcast when you do something wrong, but just see how people react to whatever happens, because that may be different from the way you are accustomed to.
American students will react according to how you present yourself. If you present yourself as very different, they're going to look at you as very different. If you want to just fade in, you just fade into the background, no one will pay attention to you. Otherwise, you can just be a person, be yourself, and people will take you for what you are.
When you're in class, make up your mind and talk. Speak out what you have to say. Even though it may take you time to express yourself, but do your best to express yourself, say it. Don't feel diminished. Just keep quiet because you think that your English is not that good. I shouldn't say this. Don't feel ashamed because you speak English with an accent. Just go ahead and say what you have to say in class.
If you don't go out and say, okay, help, you don't get anything. How should they know that you have troubles? They cannot imagine the trouble I have because they never went through it. So I have to tell them so that they understand it.
Americans are not very good at trying to take a hint or interpret subtle meaning for what it really means. Most people of the world are much, much better at that than Americans are. And so you have to spell things out very clearly to an American if you're going to be sure that you've gotten it across.
It's even an advice to a lot of other foreign students. They should really, I was pushy, but they should really try to approach American students, because then they would understand better.
The important point here is that the entire initiative has to be taken by the foreign student. Now, and many foreign students are coming from societies where that would seem wrong, that the host should be the one to offer the friendship. So that's reversed, and they're waiting for the host to offer, and he's not offering. If they only knew that the way to get help from an American was to ask for it, then they would find the key to success in how to make these relationships, because the American will not invade your privacy without getting that signal from you.
Feeling lost and confused and sad and angry and frustrated and all those things is to be expected, no matter how much they wanted to be here, no matter how well they're functioning or what good grades they're getting. They're going to feel some of these things anyway, because those are part of the process of adjustment.
So I think it's good to know that it's going to happen. It's good to know that other people have lived through it, and that all you have to do is spend enough time, really, to live through it. It will pass, and you will adjust. And if you're successful, you will become bicultural, or at least approach becoming bicultural.
Right now, I feel very comfortable here.
I feel more confident.
Right now, I'm much more relaxed.
I feel more secure. about my environment.
Right now, I know I'm very well settled. If I had to spend the next 5 years in America, I'd have no problems.
The whole experience is an experience, first of all. I mean, you learn a lot, first of all, about yourself. And I think it's very interesting. It's tough, very tough.
But now, I can handle it.
There are a couple of things I'm still not used to, but facing them doesn't seem that difficult now, you know, having come through all of that.
I think the main difference is that now I know what to expect, and I know what people expect from me.
There's still so many things I don't know, but the basic things are kind of settled, and this is important for me because I think I'm a conservative person, so I need some stability, and that's what I have now. I have a frame of my life.
I felt happy. I felt very, very happy. And I cannot believe it, because 4 months ago I was crying in the same room here and saying, what I'm doing here.
I feel happy. I'm glad here.
I feel great.
This is great.
I feel a lot more confident. I feel happier. I've made friends.